I never really understood the blockchain part in the advertising.
Yeah.
It doesn't really.
It's I get why, because
Yeah.
again there are these bad actors, and you just
Sure.
want to make sure a dollar here gets at least 75 cents to the person you want, the website, or the. But then there's it's very hard to
Yeah.
implement it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Brave browser has this
Mm-hmm.
functionality where you can actually sell your data
Yep.
for in returns for
And that's the
for
value exchange, yeah.
Exactly. And how do you think that's going to like, do you think that's going to be like the norm going forward? No.
I'm a contrarian against this.
Right.
People just want to access their videos, right?
Right.
There's 7 billion people in the world.
Right. Yeah.
Now no one really thinks about the implications
Yeah.
of if I'm doing X, Y, unless they feel violated.
Yeah.
Once that trust is gone, yes, maybe someone will ask questions or install ad blockers. But people install ad blockers in Asia, at least, because they want to access their YouTube videos really fast.
Yeah.
or they want to pay for data to be used for loading ads, because sometimes those files can be heavy,
Right.
or take up a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah.
So they're doing things for very different reasons.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like to ask them to be suddenly mature enough and sophisticated enough.
Yeah.
50 cents for what? I don't know what that, like, you wouldn't know
exactly.
how do I value that. I wouldn't know what I pay for a paywall. I know how much I wouldn't pay for certain sites,
Yeah.
but I don't pay for any paywalls right
Yeah.
now, but I'm tempted to sometimes.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, but the governments are like heading towards like more privacy, protection, and it seems like every person I talk to generally is like they don't really give a shit about their privacy, right? I mean, they're just kind of giving up, right? I mean, it's not like they didn't care from the beginning. Maybe they did care.
I mean,
but,
we grew up in a
but-
different generation, right?
Yeah.
Like if we were our grandparents who had to live through World Wars and
Yeah.
stuff like that, like
Yeah.
they have a different view on government and
Yeah, of
and,
course.
and
Yeah.
the private sector having access
Right.
to data.
Mhm.
I think my generation, or even younger, they understand the value exchange. I give up data to access sites for free, or for videos for free, or whatever, or or being profiled.
Yeah.
What they don't want then is crappy ads
Yeah.
or ads at the wrong time. So that's their expectation.
Yeah.
So that's the pushback.
Right.
And yes, the government should have some sort of like common framework, but it's very hard to establish a framework that works in Malaysia or Thailand or Singapore
right.
or the US or the EU.
Yeah.
The EU passed GDPR May 25th last year, right? And that's the most strictest version of that. And they're going to pass more legislation as well. But that also caused some ad tech companies in Europe to give up and leave. And shut down.
You're right.
They said, like, we can't be compliant to this, or it's not worth the fines. Let's focus our business elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so things are changing. Maybe not as fast enough for some people. And if you follow Brave, they want.
Yeah.
They had a very explosive talk about this value exchange.
Sure.
But I don't think it'll be mainstream.
Right.
I think people want free content.
Yeah.
They want relevant ads.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I mean, I guess the government's like heading towards that way. Most people don't really care. But it does make your job. It's not that they care. They want better ads, right?
Yeah.
So they want better ads. Governments want to control that so that people are not giving up way too much privacy for digital ads, right?
But governments are in the business of collecting data on their people,
I
right?
mean, they're the biggest gangsters in the world, right? So that's their job, and they do it legally.
Yeah, they set the laws, right?
Yeah, and they want to be the only owner of those. So
They're that
like,
Black Mirror episode, right?
Yeah,
Where they
yeah.
the social network knew more about the person in the episode than the
totally.
actual government.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, like if you look at China, I mean, they owned, like most of WeChat. They own like Alibaba, and the government owns, your financial data.
Well, I
right?
don't know. They have influence, maybe. I don't know the
I'll say own.
your words.
Yeah, my words. I'll say own. But thing is, because it depends on countries. So Chinese people probably are used to, being censored in that sense, right? By the government, they've been told you can't do this, you can't do that, and there's a lot of restrictions. Where let's say in the U.S., everybody thinks that they're free, which they're not. But like that's what's
free to extent.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. But there's an idea that you have to be free, and then I guess the government is trying to protect so that people are. Having private lives, not being monitored by Europeans, much stricter on that. I think Australia also has
because they come from
like
a legacy of a war
Wars,
and
yeah,
everything like that. Right?
exactly.
That's the mentality.
Yeah. I mean, so how does like so with these kind of privacy protections in place? I mean, how does I guess ads
How does
get
the internet
better?
stay free? It's there's predictions that we might go backwards in some of the technologies used. So
Right.
instead of audiences or data profiles existing,
Yeah.
it might just be contextual.
Yeah.
So you're reading a sports article or a news article, and that's the most we can know from you.
Yeah.
And very high level versus you went to 4 different stores and did XYZ.
Yeah.
It's a different profile.
Yeah.
And it may be that may go away, or you may end up in a different scenario where the bigger players become the source for truth for data.
Yeah.
The duopolies of the world, where they just the Amazons and Googles, they just become the source, and they just figure out what the profiles are.
Yeah.
Which may not benefit people.
Yeah.
Or nothing will change, and it's too early.
Right, right.
Because the laws, how they're written, are not written by advertising experts.
Right. Of course.
Right. And even in UK, there's trade organizations that are saying the opposite, that the entire mechanism isn't compliant.
Right.
That's a
Yeah.
a different view than just saying don't collect this data,
Right.
or must be deleted or must be stored in a different way, or you must
Right.
have this regulator and time.
Yeah.
So it's very chaotic.
Right.
If you had to look at the sector.
Yeah. And probably like every country is going to come up with something a
Yeah,
little
but
bit slightly different than
Thailand, I think is passing or passed, where if you are found in violation, you can be criminally prosecuted, right? Which is a very different thing than being like,
Yeah.
like, I don't
Wow,
know.
okay. Yeah.
And Singapore has a very good, I think very fair, it's called I think the PDPA, which has established all this. Malaysia has something very similar as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's thinking about it because it also affects news and the idea of fake news and quality journalism, right? So that's why it's all coming to the forefront.
Right. Yeah. And then, but then, but without these in place, and then in an ideal world, where's like digital as can be, as opposed to where it could be, but where it can be without all these like data protection laws in place. Like is it going to be that I just wake up in the morning and then boom, they tell me everything that I need to know to do today. All the things.
I mean,
that
what
buy.
an advertiser really wants is show you that commercial, and then from your remote you hit buy.
Right.
And
Right.
we're pretty much there because our remote is our mobile phone.
Sure. Right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's like we're probably like 6-7 years away from that being the full reality.
Right.
And that's why you have brands that they call them direct to consumer brands, right? That are just marketing directly to the consumer,
Yeah,
but they're using it because they have good data. So like in the U.S. there was one called Dollar Shave Club,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
They send you a shaver, razor once a month, right? So it
Yeah.
bought for $1 billion
Yeah.
from Procter and Gamble.
For sure. Yeah.
Because they had all the data and they knew all these men's addresses,
Right.
and they had a habit,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't know. Data will always be used. I think it makes us more responsible.
Right.
Has it gone too far? Maybe.
Yeah.
Has some unintended consequences? Yeah,
Right.
certainly,
Yeah.
for sure. But it's better than me buying an ad in a magazine and hoping for the best,
Right.
and just saying, oh,
Yeah.
things happen.
Yeah.
Right? So,
But I mean, shaving or something, all these like daily stuff is fine, as I said at the beginning. But like, how do we weed out the bad actors in this?
Yep.
And that's what I'm most concerned about.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, the industry is trying to self-regulate before the regulation comes, like any
Right.
industry.
right.
This wasn't a big deal because there's only a few $billion industry. Now it's hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Google made this year more than $100 billion.
Yeah.
This year alone.
Yeah.
1 year. So the next closest is maybe 40 billion, then 30 billion, and it just cascades from there,
Yeah.
right? So the money that's going with this is the norm,
Yeah.
right? This 10 years ago when I started this, I was the outside looking in. Now I'm the mainstream, essentially, right? This is
Sure.
it. And now it's touching our billboard ads, it's touching our television ads.
Yeah.
When we're watching TV, you're going to get a different experience from what your children are seeing.
Yeah.
Should children be seeing ads? No. So Google finally now just removed ads on YouTube
Yeah.
for children content.
Right.
Right. So we are correcting, maybe not fast enough,
Yeah.
but it also it's a balance, right?
Right.
Future Design Podcast.